if anyone can go ahead and answer them from the info that we shared. Something that I was just thinking about, someone I think it was Alice, I want to say, asked a question in the Q&A that was like, I feel like I'm struggling to find specific things about colleges to research or mention or look into. And that's where I really want to underscore the value of like reaching out to a human being, as opposed to solely leaning on the internet for some of these details, right? Because you can, I think, find some of them from like, for example, if you want to go and look up like day in the life videos on YouTube, for a certain college or university, that's a great way to kind of get a sense from students, of lots of different interests, walks of life, etc., on YouTube, and get a little bit more of that qualitative side of what it's like to be a student there. Um, the admission websites are great. The virtual opportunities, everything that kind of colleges put on are wonderful gateways. But ideally, you're able to take it one step further. And many times, colleges have lists of students that are like student ambassadors that you can reach out to with questions. Many college department websites also will have that too. So, like, if you're interested in majoring in neuroscience, I know at Pomona, there were student representatives who worked for the neuroscience department that were resources for current students who were navigating course selection and like which professor is good for what. But you can also reach out to them too as a prospective student as well. And there's no guarantee that they're going to respond, but that's just life, right? Like sometimes you cold email someone or you apply for a job and you get ghosted and you never hear back, or on a dating app, not from personal experience. So that is just something that I think is just good to prepare yourself for, is like pushing outside of your comfort zone of solely leaning on third party, YouTube, social media, etc. Again, that can be a great gateway, but ideally take it the one step further and DM the student that you see featured, on a college's social media page and be like, oh my God, I loved your feature. Like, what's one of the things that you would change about the school, or like asking kind of some of those more interesting questions to help open the opportunity for them to tell stories, is really where I think you're going to get more of those meaningful anecdotes. So that's I guess my final parting piece of advice.
I think we have a question now.
Mhm.
Uh,
So Gatita asks, how can my kid join a university class just to see what it's like?
I can answer that. A lot of universities actually offer summer program or summer classes where high school students can apply and join in to see what it's like to take classes there, to live there even. So yeah, that's one of the opportunities that students can do.
Yeah. A lot of times you can also like sometimes even like email the professor if it's not like officially organized through the admissions office. Um, and say like, hey, I'm coming, I'm planning on visiting. I was really interested in like the courses that you teach from the course catalog that I found online. I was wondering if you had, if it would be cool for me to come in and shadow. Students would do that all the time at Pomona. It was very common. But also sometimes they have formal visit opportunities that the admissions office organizes. So yeah, feel free to kind of peruse around and see that. All right. Next one is, should an applicant send the required amount of letters of recommendation, or can they send an extra teacher recommendation? Morgan, what do you think?
Oh, well, we have Peter helped us answer this one already. So Peter said maybe one extra letter, but probably not more than that. And I think that's a like really spot on answer. I like the quotes on there's a lot of paper they have to shuffle. I actually did work in an office long enough ago that we had stacks of paper recommendations. And I realize that is now like the dark ages, but it was a thing. Yeah, and I think one of the things that we say, this is like one of the like default pieces of advice that we would give, is follow the instructions that the college provides. At this time of year, we think about that a lot with regard to wait lists, that like you need to follow the instructions they give you if they offer you a position on the wait list. And so in terms of recommendation letters, you want to default to what do they say they require or recommend, and kind of keep it at that. One of the things one of my favorite admission officers used to say in terms of like application content is, if everything is a priority, then nothing is. And I just love that, because it's like you can keep sending rec letters, but at some point they're all going to blur together and not have value. And for me, I would rather they have less letters that have more like sharpness, more uncommon qualities, more strength than a third one or a fourth one that's kind of like a watered down version of the other ones, or it's repetitive. And this may be me, right? This is like not every reader, but I think when you can imagine when you're reading lots of text, like reading an application, you've got essays, you've got a counselor letter, perhaps you might have teacher letters. I find that when I get bored, I default to scanning and my focus comes back a little bit. And so I like to caution students to send things they think are adding value and meaning. More is not always better in this situation. And so you just want to make sure like what you're giving them to read is worth their time reading.
There was a question that I answered that I just wanted to like verbalize, which was, how do you connect with someone at the school that is answering questions when your child doesn't have a clue what they want to study? That's really normal. That's actually, I'd say, if that's your situation, you are among friends. It's really typical actually for students to get more of a sense of what they are interested in by some of these campus interactions, engagements, virtual tours, student panels, etc. So I'd say when you're in terms of kind of reaching out to students or trying to figure out who to ask questions for, any form of commonality is a great way to kind of open up that conversation. You know, if you are, say you're at a college campus that's really busy and there's like 10 different tour guides, they do a little intro spiel. One of them might be from your state, or might, you know, they might say, in my free time, I, you know, do equestrian, and you do equestrian, right? I'd say go with whoever has some kind of commonality with you, and it doesn't have to be academic.
I also like the idea of pursuing the question, how do you support students who are undecided or come in undeclared? And is there a program where you can enter for the first year that has specific advising that will help students with professional advisors who are like trained to help them hone in on something more specific that they want to study. You can apply to college undecided in many cases. And I think in those, like telling a good story about your multiple interests and how you want to get to college and explore them is like a reasonable and very healthy thing to do in many cases.
Mhm.
Let's see. How do colleges who see who's looking on their website when you browse? Oh gosh, I don't know what the technology, I don't think I can describe the technology behind that.
I think
I
we've
think
actually talked about it a little bit, like if a college sends you an email and you click on that link, you can track that you opened it, that you've been like on that website. I know nowadays there's like probably like web browsers that like block certain like things from being tracked. So in that case, like colleges might not be able to do it if your like web browser is too like safe and secure. But yeah, there are ways for colleges to track.
it's, yeah, I think a lot of, so ping data is what it's called in Slate, which is this application, like management application reading system that lots of colleges use. And it kind of is like, it's really similar to like cookies on any website, right? Where like they know your browsing history and they're going to recommend, you know, certain things on your Instagram feed or whatnot. It's a really similar kind of technology that's built in that way. So there's no, I'd say, real steps that you need to take. If a college measures that you're on their website, and you're on their email list already, most likely they are seeing that engagement in some way through the wonders of the internet. There was a good question about financial aid, from Erica. If you're visiting as a parent for your child, is it worth seeking out to the head of financial aid to speak with them about the level of aid they typically give? I don't think it necessarily has to be the head of financial aid per se. Every college will do this differently, but at Pomona, actually, students had a financial aid counselor as well as an admissions officer. And that's not the same way at every single school, but I do think actually, you know, reaching out to financial aid is something that, like, normalizing that earlier than later is a really good practice as a student and family, especially if you are in a situation where there is more ambiguity about your cost of attendance at that school, right? At some colleges and universities, you know, say it's a school that meets 100% of demonstrated financial need and they don't have a lot of merit scholarship opportunities. That's a pretty cut and dry conversation for most families, right? There's no ambiguity of like a merit-based award that they'd be getting. But even then, say you have a situation where you have multiple assets or a farm or a home, or there's some kind of part of your financial situation where you feel like people need to understand that on paper it looks a certain way, but it's not the reality. reaching out to individual financial aid offices to see how they factor that in and what their institutional calculation looks like. They call it institutional methodology. It's basically like kind of like all the things that we say, like every college measures demonstrated interest differently. Kind of the same thing with financial aid and affordability, right? So definitely, I really welcome reaching out to financial aid. I think it also makes them feel like less scary when you're, reaching out, asking genuine questions that, they will have expertise and guidance around. So yeah, I definitely encourage that.
I just answered a question about ED, and then there's another one. It's kind of a follow-up. So for ED strategy, so this is the binding application path. Do you do reach? Do you go for a reach school because it betters chances, even if it's still hard, or maybe go down a tier or two in selectivity to maximize the ED commitment? It's a good question.
Great question. Shay, do you have any thoughts on
I
this?
really think it depends on the student and the family. If it's a school that you're absolutely happy with, and you want to like really, really maximize your chance in getting there, then yeah, you could go with the early decision. Sometimes students will utilize the early decision to go for a harder school because it improves their chances. So it really depends on what the purpose the student is and family is using the early decision for.
I've worked with students where I remember this from my first boarding school. They would say like, if I do ED at this school that's like in the most highly selective tier, let's say, they would say, am I throwing it away? So like wasting the ED chance. And sometimes you can look back on it and see that they didn't get in, and you can kind of feel like, yeah, we maybe could have gone I don't know, 10 or 15 points below in acceptance rate. Might have been more likely. But sometimes for some students, it's actually really healthy to go through the process to that school if it's their true favorite, dream, whatever, and get the rejection directly from the school so they can move on. Like that is actually, I don't know, like dealing with the bad news is actually a good form of growth and can be healthy for them. But there are cases like, when you're working with students where you can see what the options are, and some options seem strategically smarter. So partly it depends like on what the student is really, really passionate about, what they feel like they can make that commitment to.
Yeah.
And then I don't know, like how efficient you want to be, how much you want to get it over with. And it's hard. It's hard. And it depends on the schools. So that's like we joke so much about it depends. Yeah, there's a lot there.
Yeah. My take on this question of like, should you go hard for like a really, really heavy reach school and early decision? I tried to like talk with students of mine about reachable reaches. And I think it's important to have a little bit of like perspective and reality. Like I had a student of mine who was like, I kind of want to just like do REA at Harvard because like it's just like it's just my dream. And I'm like, you can do that. Absolutely. Statistically, you have a very, very slim chance. And I actually think that you have some exciting reach options where you applying actually could result in an acceptance. This feels like a little bit more of like a shot in the dark here. And I think you'd have to ask yourself, are you willing to sacrifice the potential statistical advantage that you can gain from a place where you actually have a pretty good odds of being admitted versus a school that is arguably more unrealistic, right? So it's a personal decision. There's a lot of factors that families weigh in when they're making that. But in my opinion, I would usually try to steer students towards smart early decision choices, what I would call, where it's not, it's a school that's still providing you with all this, similar things as to what you're maybe excited about of like an uber unrealistic reach school. But yeah, it's
What you're making me think about, Tom, is like this idea that when students really know the why behind schools on their list or why they would ED, it can be like worth it to stretch for that reach school if they really know why. And if it's kind of like a shot in the dark and they're like, I want the best school I can ED to, like that's a different question, But if they're really set on it, I think it can be worth it. What's hard is when people look back and go, they don't get into their ED and they're looking at ED2 and they want to go at the same level of selectivity and hope for a different outcome or add more schools with that level of selectivity. And that's probably more when I'm like, you have one piece of information here that we should use as like a data point, maybe to then come down a tier. But it really just depends what your goals are.
Yeah. I think the last question that we have here, and then we can log off for the night, is early action ever not a good idea? And this is a really good question. And I feel like we'll all have maybe like slightly different answers. I know I have mine, but what do you all think?
Oh, I'll start. I mean, I can start. Like, so I live in the glorious college town of Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And so our state flagship public university has early action. And so this is a case where generally it's better to go EA than regular decision. And acceptance rates nationally tend to be more generous EA. So I think I think I would like lean towards EA for most students. When I would caution someone from EA is if they had major grade fluctuation or weak grades in 11th grade. I might want to slow them down a little bit to regular decision to see the performance, but I think we tend to see higher acceptance rates for early action, like more often than not.
Yeah, I agree with Morgan. There's a lot of the public schools, even for out-of-state students, if you apply earlier, your chances as an out-of-state student is a little bit better because of that. But I would say for a student that shouldn't apply early, maybe if they're not ready, like they don't have their essays ready, or if they don't have a certain test score ready by that point, it might be better to wait for regular decisions so that you can prepare all of that.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. There are a few, I feel, handfuls of like, and these are like real anomalies where there's actually a slightly higher likelihood of being admitted regular. So I put in a resource. Oh, I put it to host and panelists. Whoops, my bad. In the chat, I'm just going to leave a resource that is a really popular one that we end up usually sharing on a lot of our webinars. It's the Big J Education Consulting resource spreadsheets. So many college counselors use these when helping build lists for students, equipping them with lots of really valuable information about expected merit aid packages, expected need-based aid packages, early decision and acceptance rates versus regular. They now have been, when possible, providing early action acceptance rates as well for schools that do report it, because not all schools do actually parse out that particular rate. So you'll see, it's a good idea, I feel like, to check that page of any of the colleges that are on your students list, and just kind of noting, are there ones where like it actually is looking like applying regular is slightly beneficial, and or you have a little bit more time to put more effort into some of the essays, for example. Like I feel like I don't know if it's Georgetown, but like there is a school that offers early action that like has a lot of essays. And I was working with a student this past year where I'm like, you like don't have a lot of time to write these, and I don't think they're going to be that good. So I feel like you're rushing to get rejected is a phrase that I learned from one of our colleagues, Steph, who works on our program advising team. And it can really be the case for some students to have that more time to put together a stronger app. Well, you have been a wonderful audience. Thank you so much. Audience, I don't know if that really is the term for this.
We'll take it.
We'll take it, yeah. So thank you to our special guests, the dogs, all of the beauty of Zoom being what it was. Jay and Morgan, thank you so much for joining today too. And Rebecca, thanks for holding things down on the moderation front. Wes, best of luck to all of you with your process. Again, we're here at College Essay Guide to support you with more webinars. And yes, you will get an email of the recording and the slides as soon as tomorrow. So thanks so much. Bye, everyone.
Good night.